That's Drew.
That's Mike.
And that's Robert Carlson.
Hey, guys.
Robert Carlson is a California-based YouTuber that is mad about making movies with toys. For the past decade, Robert has been filming creations of Lego coasters, marble runs, Hot Wheels tracks, and stop-motion short films for his channel 5MadMovieMakers. Turning 10 years old in just a few days, the channel now has 525,000 subscribers and nearly 433 million views. Follow the link in the bio to check out his YouTube channel for a 10-year celebration this Saturday, July 18th, and check his website for all kinds of miniature adventures. Robert, thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure. So, yeah, why don't we start talking about how you got into filmmaking? That's sort of the basis of your YouTube channel. How'd you get into filmmaking, Robert?
Sure, yeah. I learned how to use a VHS camcorder when I was a kid, and I'm probably going to be one of the last generations to say that because VHS tapes are going out of style. But my dad and my uncle were actually into filmmaking when they were kids with Super 8. And so when we were growing up, they kind of passed that on to us by teaching us how to use a camera and record it and play it back and even record stuff out of order to make it seem like something was happening that wasn't. And so that was really exciting for me. But I didn't start editing on a computer until years later. And that was on Windows XP, and that was a bit of an adventure to try and put videos together there. But I homeschooled for 1 year in 8th grade, and that's when I really started making my own videos, learning how to export them with Pinnacle Studio. And it all kind of came from a childhood love of Thomas the Tank Engine. I wanted to recreate some of those stories, and I ended up doing some Lego stop motion fan films of Indiana Jones as well. And then I started my YouTube channel in high school, sort of just as a side thing, and now it's taken off and become my main gig.
Yeah, I mean, it's been unbelievably successful right on that side. And so let's go back to when you first had that camera. So when you were making videos on VHS, I think Drew and I obviously are well acquainted with VHS. You had the big camera, size was much bigger, right? What was the editing process for you then? From my perspective, I never edited any video on VHS. I always just would always watch home videos, and it was like one take, right? Never edited. So what was that process?
That was the same with me too.
Well, I think I first got the idea when I watched a video that my grandpa had made of us going on a trip to Disneyland. And I was very confused because he started playing the tape at the beginning, and he had a little wall of pictures that he'd taken while he was at Disneyland. And I was very confused. I said, "Grandpa, how did you get all these pictures up here? Because the trip hasn't happened yet in the video." And then he said, "Oh, I left a break of about a minute or two at the beginning of the tape and then recorded the whole trip at Disneyland. And then he went back afterwards and recorded over that part." And so then I started to understand, like you can do things out of order here or save a space for later and go back and fill it in. Obviously, it's not like I was cutting the tapes and splicing them together like you would with Super 8 or something. So I never did anything super advanced in terms of that, but that was the first concept I had of editing something in post or after the fact, I guess. But we would do sort of tricks with the VHS tape where one of my siblings would be in front of the camera and they'd say, "Hello, I'm going to disappear." And then we cut the tape and they move out of frame and then we start rolling again and they're gone, so that I guess was more linear, but still it felt like magic in a movie camera.
Was this something that you and your siblings immediately took to together, or was it something that you took to yourself and were able to bring your siblings in sort of as your own creative project? How did you get to making films with your siblings?
I think all of us were interested in it. We have a tape somewhere of my dad showing us how to use it for the first time. And we did one thing called walking on the ceiling where we walk across the frame and then he stopped recording, turned the camera, and then it looks like we're walking up the side of the frame. And then it looks like we're walking on the ceiling, which was pretty funny. But all of us were definitely interested in it from the beginning because then he kind of handed the camera over to us and let us do whatever he wanted with it. I did make a lot of films that was just were just toys in front of the camera. If I couldn't get my siblings to be a part of it. But all of us did that. You know, I look back, and my sister Rebecca made a big film with her Barbie dolls and her Madeline dolls. And I guess I'm just the one that kept up the most with it over the years and really pushed it to digital editing. But all of us had continued some interest in filmmaking throughout high school and even college. And now I would say four out of my 5 siblings, 4 of us have edited our own videos and published them somewhere.
I mean, one of your sisters has a very successful Instagram calligraphy business, which has video to it. So, I mean, I would say your brother has a very successful music side. So, I'd say, you know, there's some kind of creativity that's in your family that is, I would say, it probably stems back to your father, right?
Yeah, I mean, my dad, but also my mom was super into music and some more artistic things like and crafts, and then my grandparents as well on both sides. My mom's side more crafts, and my dad's side more performance, like acting. My grandpa on my dad's side was actually a professionally trained clown. He went to clown school.
Really?
Yeah. He was really also a preacher, so he had both sides of performance covered there.
I feel like that's a great background to have for a preacher, just because you want to be inspiring, you want to be friendly, and you want to have people be able to like come up to you and be comfortable. And a clown is exactly that. That's awesome.
Yeah, you have to be engaging with your audience and definitely know how to laugh with people. You can't take yourself too seriously.
Yeah, 100%. Let's take it back a little bit further too. So 2003, Christmas, your brother got you a Skyrail marble track. And so at this point, was this before your VHS introduction or after?
It was shortly afterward. It wasn't too long after that. I think the first VHS footage that we shot was in 2001 or 2002. So I had started developing a serious interest in roller coasters right around 2003 or 2004. And that marble track that he got me just at the local toy shop, it was called Pterodactyl Toys, which is now sadly out of business. But it was one of those local shops that had just all these really cool, unique toys, some of which were from overseas. So that Skyrail stuff is from Italy, actually, and it's pretty hard to find in stores here. I've gotten most of mine online since then, but that really kickstarted a whole roller coaster building phase, you know, to try and recreate famous roller coasters I liked with even just the however many 10 meters of track. But sorry, what was the other part of that question?
Yeah, and so was that before? That was before your introduction to film, and then you know how did you get into like that toy and the evolution of the toys after that? I guess we'll go from there.
Right. Okay. Yeah, the filmmaking part was tricky because the marbles for that track were so small and they would move by so fast on the camera that I think I ended up taking more photographs at first, and I kept asking my mom if I could borrow her digital camera. But after a while, she said, "No, you can't. I don't want all these pictures of these tracks on my computer." I was like, "Why not?" Like I couldn't understand it, and I wanted to also print out from the computer. I wanted to print out clip art with the ride name on it and put a little sign over the entrance to the ride or near this where I thought the station would be, but she didn't want me wasting ink for that, so I think I had to draw my own.
That's a pretty creative way to like find your love and passion for roller coasters. So just to pull a thread, I love roller coasters as well. Grew up going to a local amusement park here in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and
is that a Dorney Park?
That is Dorney Park. Yeah,
nice.
You've been?
And I'm from Ohio originally, so I was pretty happy that you mentioned Cedar Point as having one of your favorite roller coasters too.
Oh yeah, Cedar Point is legendary, and I've never been to Dorney Park. I've been to Cedar Point many times, so I'll have to catch a trip out to Dorney. But sometimes I've read up on a lot of different parks, and I'll name a park that's really close to something like, oh, like, you know what that is? I'm like, well, I've never been. I've just,
Just done some research.
yeah.
Well, so one of my questions, and where I was leading there, is your favorite park is Cedar Point, right, in Ohio, and you're from California. So where did that trip come from?
Well, both of my parents grew up in Ohio, and my mom was from Massillon, Ohio, and my dad had lived in a couple different towns as his father was moving around to different churches preaching. But we have a lot of family that still lives there in Ohio, and so every couple of years we'll manage to fit in a big family reunion in Ohio. But then I'll also sneak in a trip to Cedar Point with my cousins, usually every time I go, if I can, or Kings Island, which is on the other side of the state.
Yeah,
that's my neck of the woods. I grew up going to Kings Island when I was little, and the Beast is my favorite roller coaster of all time. I love the wooden roller coaster so much.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that one's awesome, and I can't believe it's still the longest wooden coaster in the world. It's just such a great ride out in the backwoods there. And riding that at night is a real treat. I mean, that is something else. You feel like you're in another world.
You're absolutely right, especially when you do those repeated loops through that dark tunnel and everything just blacks out, but all you hear is just this metallic wooden roar.
And everyone's screaming on the ride behind you. Yeah,
very visceral experience for sure. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Cedar Point is definitely on my list of places to visit. It's always been, my dad and I have always talked about going together, so.
I mean, it's so interesting because a lot of people out here, their idea of an amusement park is a really heavily themed park like Disneyland, or even Knott's Berry Farm is kind of going back, and they're adding a lot of theming to their attractions to try and keep some competition going. But then Cedar Point is a different world where the location is already so great and so beautiful out on the edge of that lake that you don't need to put big rocks around all of your rides to make it really special. It's just, plus that would be very expensive for rides that are 300 or 400 feet tall.
Yeah. A lot of rocks.
Yeah. I don't know.
But there's a big difference in the theme park world, and you hit it right there. There's the theme park, and then there's the roller coaster parks. And I would say Dorney is very much on that roller coaster side as well. It's you're going there for the attractions, the rides, and you're going to Cedar Point as well. So that I'm not a fan of the themed side because you don't get the better roller coasters typically. But
yeah, I mean, the atmosphere can be really nice and impressive at those parks, but the thrill factor, but also just, getting on a really big ride that feels like you're flying through space, is a little harder to pull off if you're just in a warehouse.
Yep. Yeah. Very, very true. And so that's a great transition. So then we get into 2010, right? And so clearly we've talked about your love of roller coasters, and we could probably do a whole podcast on roller coasters.
Yes, absolutely.
Maybe we'll come back and do that. But so you then move from your entry with the marble track, right? And now you get into Connects, and you start making roller coasters with your brothers, right? And that is what starts the channel, which is 5MadMovieMakers. But before that, we talked a little bit about the Indiana Jones filmmaking, right? And why?
Right. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead if you wanted.
Yeah, the first YouTube video I ever actually made was not for my own channel. It was for my dad's YouTube channel.
Okay.
For his company at the time. It was called allaboardtoys.com. And he had just started it as a test to show his web design skills with his work buddies as sort of a promo. But then they actually started selling toys online. And then they eventually started selling, Thomas wooden trains and Barbie dolls. And then Lego came into the picture, and they had Lego Indiana Jones toys that I was super excited about. And he said, hey, why don't you make an animation for that channel and we can pay you? And so that was my first, I guess, business gig.
Wow.
How cool.
Which was, nice of him to kind of work me into that. But then that video, they sent it out in a big email blast to a lot of their families that were customers at the time. And it actually got to 1 million views within a couple of years, which I was pretty happy with, for a first stop motion YouTube video. But yeah, then I didn't start my channel for a couple years after that. But I was always kind of asking, like, hey, can I have my own YouTube channel? They're like, no, you're not old enough. Even though I was, over 13, but whatever.
Yeah. Well, at that point, you're still listening to your parents, and you should continue to listen to your parents' kids, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have a 5-month-old, so I'm definitely want to set that precedent, right? So let's go back about the channel that you were there, and you're making this stop motion video. You said that your video got 1 million views pretty quickly. So let's call it maybe 3 years. That was about 2008, right?
Yeah, that was when the video was posted. It was May 2008, so over 12 years ago now. Wow.
and to think about 1 million views on YouTube in 2008 is a significantly different thing than 1 million views in 2020, right? That's a huge feat, and I think we shouldn't breeze right over that. That's really, really impressive, and congratulations to that, because that's really cool. You'll be the first person that we've talked to that had 1 million views in 2008. I mean, that's
well, I'd have to go back and look at the exact moment. I would always be very particular about, like, well, it wasn't in 2008, it was in 2009 or 2010. It was cool that the first video that I had online was that successful, and it was definitely helped by my dad pushing it at first through his business outreach stuff, but then also, I remember telling some people in high school that first year, I was like, yeah, it's at 300,000 views now. And people were like, what? Like, people were very, because people were starting their own channels and stuff, but you post it for friends and family to have 10 or 20 views. So that was pretty unusual.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's unusual even today. The channels that start don't get 10,000 views. 10,000 is huge. And so then 2010 rolls, and you start your channel, which is what we're talking about today, right? 5MadMovieMakers. And that's where your goal here was to have fun with your brothers, right? Have fun with the family, create your love for roller coasters in real life using Kinects.
Yeah, that was those were the first videos that I posted, were with these micro Kinect roller coasters. I'd played at different points with larger tracks, the original Kinects that are really tall roller coasters, almost as tall as a person, actually. But then these were the smaller rods, but you could actually felt like a bigger layout into a smaller room, because you could bend the track a little tighter and have a more detailed structure. But it was also, I remember, really small for your fingers, and trying to pinch everything together and snap it all was pretty frustrating at times. But we thought, like, oh, this is like the big new thing. And then those first couple videos didn't really take off like crazy, but we got a couple nice comments responding to that. And I remember, I think the first video is in my bedroom, and it's against, it's just kind of a very dull white background with some carpet, and it's not super exciting or involving. But later that summer, as we kept posting videos, I filmed one outdoors in the sandbox with Lego track, and people really seemed to connect with that. That was kind of a jumping point. We're like, hey, this is something new that people haven't done online with toy roller coasters. Is most of the videos, even today, you'll see just a lot of stuff that's recorded, especially if it's recorded by kids, in someone's room or in someone's basement. And it was very unusual to take that stuff outside, mostly because these pieces are really small and you could lose them in the sand or in the grass, but then also it would get dirty or sticky, and you'd have to clean it up afterwards. But I felt that the scenery was a lot better and more involving, and felt a little more similar to what a real amusement park would feel like.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that. It definitely gave that feel, and I think it was you hit it on the head. It was a totally different perspective to see outside, and you definitely, even inside. I mean, the roller coaster that you built was fantastically impressive for anyone, and I can relate to those little, the little green pieces that snap in between on Kinects.
Oh yeah.
Those are a pain. Holy cow. But yeah, so
Yeah, I could still feel like the trying to like press it out of that thing, to like disconnect it.
Yeah, definitely. I never got the roller coaster sets, but I was always very much interested in them. And so you're doing this with your brothers, and you guys are now exploring outside. Let's go through a little bit of, the creative process. And it one question before we get there is, you're doing the roller coaster side with your brothers, but there's another love to your channel, which is the stop motion. Is that's you on your own, and the roller coasters and car videos are kind of with your brother?
Yeah, a lot of the videos with the cars going down the track. I mean, I tended to do a significant amount of building the layout myself, but then especially when it came to filming, I would get my youngest brother Matthew or middle brother, I don't know how you say that, Mark. He's the third born in the family. I'm the second. But I would get them to put the car down the track, and that could be frustrating because it would fall off a lot of times and crash pretty frequently. And so sometimes getting them to stick around for a half hour while I kept trying to get different angles and make sure I got all the way through from the top to the bottom. It could be a little tricky, but they were usually pretty good sports, and I would actually get more frustrated than they would because you could hear me in the background of the sandbox video. At the end, I included some bloopers and outtakes, and every time it falls off, I go, or ah. Still have all those sounds in there, which I don't really feature those kind of outtakes anymore. But I'm also a lot more used to failures now, where I'm not, yelling out every time it doesn't work.
Yeah, I guess after 10 years of doing it, you're pretty in tune with how long it takes to make that video, right?
Yeah.
How many tries.
Yeah, I usually have a bit of an expectation that it's going to take some adjustment to get things to work the way you want them to.
And what inspired you to focus on stop motion in your own artistic endeavors?
Well, growing up, I loved watching Wallace and Gromit. Those just blew me away. The Aardman animations, especially the Wrong Trousers short film, which has a big train chase at the end, which looking back on, I think is a parody of the minecart chase in Temple of Doom, which had come out, I think, a year or two prior. I'm not sure. That's just like one of those things, but it feels like, a parody, but on a very small scale in someone's apartment with the toy train flying around. And so that always caught my attention. But of course, I grew up watching a lot of Disney films, a lot of Pixar films. And I was always very interested in storytelling with a camera. I also liked reading a whole ton and a lot of stories like that. And so stop motion was kind of a way to make really imaginative worlds that as a kid you don't have the budget to get a huge train chase, but you can get the Lego train out and you can run that around in front of a little painting you've drawn or a picture that you've drawn, or so a lot of the early films are just me and my siblings playing pretend, and there's not a whole lot of stop motion. Like we have one where the Lego train is going around the circle, and then I cut to my siblings sitting on a couch and they're pretending that they're in the train, or that they're operating the control booth or something like that. But then there are a couple moments in that where I would actually animate something really quick, because with the VHS camera you could record for a very short amount of time and stop recording, and you try and get it where it's just like a frame or two at a time, which of course was not very precise at all. Where you would move something and you just record for a short little bit and then move something again. So if I wanted the train to crash into something, and then smoke to come out of it, I would move it a little bit, capture that, move it again, and then break away the Lego building, and then I would put tissues in for smoke. And I would, you could still do sound while it was recording the video. So when the smoke appeared, I would just over the camera I'd go like that, just really loudly. And then you played it back and it would make all of a sudden a big noise. But sometimes I would get too close to the camera and you can actually see my nose sticking over the front of it. So it's not super professional there. But that was the very early beginnings of animation for me. And then I really got into it in middle school with a Nikon Coolpix camera that had a built-in stop motion feature. And it was a little digital camera. But you could take a picture and then another one, and it would automatically stitch that together into a video sequence. and it would even show you your previous frame overlaid on the next one you were going to take, which is what they call onion skin, I guess, for professional stop motion. For a little camera, that was pretty impressive, and that really helped us. My siblings and I were messing around and competing to try and see who could make the smoothest animation or the coolest car crash with Hot Wheels, spinning out into each other, or just a lot of messing around during the summer. But during my 8th grade year, which is the only year I homeschooled, the rest of the my education was all public school, and then in college a private school. But then that was the year that I really started taking filmmaking seriously, and like seeing how I could imagine something and then turn it into a final product and add sound to it and music to it. And so that Indiana Jones animation at the end of that year was kind of the culmination of all of that.
That's very interesting. So that camera, I've never heard of that feature. That's wild that a little like Coolpix, I would have never guessed that kind of sub brand of Nikon would have that feature. Is that what you made for the ice cream commercial?
Oh yeah, so on 5MadMovieMakers, I think that might be my first stop motion on that channel.
It is.
Because I'd been in Ohio with my family, and we had gone on a trip to Cedar Point, and on the radio driving around in Ohio, I'd heard an ad. It said, "Hey, this is the Ruggles Ice Cream Company. We have an advertisement competition. Make a 30-second video and send it, and you could win, whatever it was, a couple $100 or a flat screen TV or something." I thought, oh, that's awesome. So I went back after vacation in Colorado, and I spent 3 days in my bedroom with the camera on a tripod aimed at the floor with these little a poster board with these little sticks on top of them. It was like flexi sticks or something that were all different colors, and I made a little character, and he jumps around this tub of ice cream and smiles and sings. And I submitted the video, and then when the results were announced, all 3 of the winners were within about all within the Ohio area.
Oh, yeah.
I had put my address in as from Colorado. And so even though I felt pretty proud of the video, and of course my parents said, "Oh, yours was better than anyone else's," I did not win because I don't think I considered what their target audience was for this contest and promotion.
I'm sure they were pretty confused. Like, why is this kid from Colorado? Like, what is he?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Like, I honestly, it's one of my favorite videos on your channel.
No way.
I thought it was awesome. Drew and I were talking before this, and I was like, "Did you watch it?" He's like, "Yeah." I thought it was great. So shame on them.
Well, the other thing too, I really liked hearing you talk about the creative process just now too, and sort of breaking it down to just how simple things are in the real life perspective. That it's just using tissues for smoke. It's just using your own voice for voice effects for the sound of that, and that's very cool. It's very compelling when it comes in a finished product, because you recognize like, oh, he's just doing that with his voice, but that makes it so accessible to people that are wanting to do the same thing. You don't need super professional equipment. You don't need sound effects to go out and make something that's very creative, very compelling, very interesting. I find myself watching your videos from beginning to end because I valued that simplicity in it. But that's not to say that making it as simple as it certainly sounds like. I'm sure there's plenty of takes for a 1-minute video that your viewers don't get to see, but it's very cool.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, if you guys got to the Ruggles video, you really did your research on the background, because only my family has talked to me about that video. Really, it's kind of a funny video. It's pretty obscure in the 5MadMovieMakers catalog, but I'm really glad you liked it, and I was proud of it at the time. There's a funny anecdote with that video too, is the camera starts to get blurry at a couple points because the camcorder I was using, it was a Sony camcorder that could take pictures, but earlier that year, our family had taken it on a boat with my cousins, and I had been filming off the front bow of the boat as dolphins were swimming by, but all the salt got in the camera. And then anytime after that, if you use the camera for more than 10 or 20 minutes, it would start to fuzz up, and I don't know if it was like overheating or what. So I would have to wait. I would have to turn the camera off, wait for it to cool down, and then take another picture after that. It was a whole process. But yeah, definitely there's a lot of trial and error behind the scenes and just little things like that even sometimes I'll forget till I go back and look at some of the leftover footage that I had. But I like what you said about, that kind of willingness to use whatever resources were at my disposal, because I think when you're a kid, you're a lot more willing to try stuff and go out and fail and be goofy, but you're just trying to get the end process better and better each time. But I had a lot of friends in college or afterwards that were always interested in filmmaking or video, but I think they were always very afraid of failing, or, oh, it's not going to be good enough. And they were very focused and stuck on those technical aspects. And I think a lot of the channels I like to watch, it's like, well, they make do with what they have and they push on through to reach an end goal, even if it's not, the most professional or well thought out way. It's just using whatever they got to build a world or an idea or a joke out of it.
Yeah, and you can
One
always.
of my other favorite videos that I watched it just this morning, but it was called the Lego Vortex of Death, and it's just a bowl of water with one of those rapidly spinning things that makes a funnel in the water, and it's chaos inside with the Legos, and it's so funny, it's so interesting to me. I found it hilarious. I loved watching it.
Well, that one I have to give all the credit to my brothers Matthew and Mark, because I think that was their idea. And they were messing around with that. And I might have helped them film one or two shots in slow motion of the stuff spinning through. It looks like a tornado, like in Wizard of Oz. But then they did all the voiceover effects for that video, and they had a blast doing that. It's just one of those ridiculous things that it's like, oh man, like someone just had an idea that morning. We said, okay, let's do it. And so yeah, and there are a couple of videos on the channel. There was another marble run, I think it's Basement Marble Run, that Matthew and Mark did entirely by themselves to say, okay, Robert, we know you're the video guy, but like we want to show that we can do it too. But then pretty much since I started college, I've been producing all of the videos. But it's great to have Mark do the music for the past, I don't know, like 7 or 8 videos I've done. He's done the score for every video. And I do pay him for that, so that's good. But then really cool. Matthew will help me build the layout or add some theming to it if I'm around at home in Colorado. So it's cool to see everyone's still involved in some way or another.
That is very cool. And I think that your videos do a good job, and I'm thinking back to the Vortex of Death too, that they whisk you into another world almost, that it's got this sort of magic realism to it that you feel like I'm still in the real world. I know it's in a sandbox. I know it's a bowl of water, but it takes you into a different sort of fantasy world that I think is very, very cool. How do you find yourself now, and over the course of your now decade on YouTube, how do you find yourself maintaining that sort of childhood sense of wonder that you maybe started out with way back at the beginning with just playing with toys and wanting to create something? How have you kept that across your career on YouTube, and how do you keep that today?
Yeah, I thank you very much, by the way, for that compliment. But I think it's interesting because I don't necessarily think of a lot of the videos I work on as nostalgic for me. And I think I get a lot of comments of people saying, oh, this reminds me of how I used to play with toys when I was a kid. But I think, at least for me, I try and challenge myself with each video to say, okay, what have I not done, or what angles have I not captured yet? It's more of a continuation of what I was starting to do as a kid than a revisiting or a recalling, or like, oh, let me do that again, or let me recapture that feeling. Because I think when you're a kid, you're always trying to build something bigger or better or faster, or build a little world that's more detailed or intricate. And just expanding on that theme is, I think, a continual challenge that any adult can enjoy. And I see I do see a lot of, I think, adult fans of, say, Legos or model railroading get really into the detail side of things, and for me, I try and get a little more of a broader picture of how can I make something that's unique or different, but still feels like it's accessible, it's attainable. It's not, wow, how long did this take him? It's like, oh, that's cool. I wish I could like ride that roller coaster or be in that moment, or like I could build that in my backyard, kind of an idea. And I hope it's an inspiration to kids to build their own tracks or roller coasters. But I do spend a lot of time watching a lot of different movies to get ideas, reading a lot of different books, for sure. And then I think an element of faith as well. At least I think that the Christian faith celebrates the sort of childlike perspective and a freshness and a newness and the creation aspect, for sure. And that's been a continual source of inspiration for me as well.
That's really cool. Yeah, that I think I heard you maybe talk about that in another podcast you did, or something along those lines, and that stuck out to me. I grew up going to Catholic school and went to Catholic high school, and I went to a Jesuit school, and they told us one thing that really stuck with me is that God is in all things, and that to me makes me appreciate the world with that sort of childhood sense of wonder, just appreciating that every little thing is a reflection of that in some way. So I appreciated hearing you talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just reading this book that by Madeline L. Engel, who is the author of Wrinkle in Time, and she's talking about her writing process, and she says something like, God is not only interested in religion, he's interested in everything, and that could be your hobbies, that could be your passions, that could be your crafts, that could be all sorts of things, and that kind of just opens up the possibilities of what we can dig to. And I think a lot of people, if they're trying to make something helpful, or especially like faith related, sometimes it's like, oh, the only thing I can do that's helpful to that is if it's explicitly talking about these subjects or themes. But I'm really happy with the channel that I can just take this sort of fun playfulness and continue to build onto that, even though it's not explicitly trying to convey any values or anything, that I hope it still is a source of inspiration for others as well.
I think it is. I remember reading one comment specifically, and the person said, these videos make me want to go build these tracks in my backyard and film them too, but that would be plagiarism. But I thought, yeah, it makes me feel that way too. It makes me feel I can do this. I can do things like that. I don't think I can to your level. I don't think I have the patience or the dedication that you've shown for the past 10 years.
You never know.
Again, you get the condensed minute at the end, but definitely an inspiration for sure. And you've also written a book yourself too. Is that correct?
Yeah, I had a project going throughout college that I wanted to write a book based off an idea I had in high school, and it was just sort of a crazy idea of these mice that use Lionel trains to get around their neighborhood, but then one of the mice goes evil and tries to take it over for himself. And I just had the idea stuck in my head for a long time, and finally put it out on the paper. So it was interesting doing that, because I took a month off of doing YouTube videos, which I try and post at least every month, if not, within a few weeks of each other. But that was unusual. And my family's kind of like, hey, like, you haven't posted in a long time. But I was spending a month out here in California just trying to finish up. It was only 60 pages long, but I was trying to, draw pictures for each chapter and proofread everything. But it was completely different experience for making a video. It's almost the opposite, because for a video, you'll think of something, but then you have to say, okay, how do I make that possible? How do I get all the resources to build that, or to get that on screen? And for a book, it's like, well, anything you can imagine can happen. But then there's a lot more process of narrowing down of, okay, why do I want that to happen? Or how does that tie into everything else thematically? Or how is that story going, how are different plot points going to come back into the story? And I really would like to get back into writing and perhaps write another book, especially. I think I learned a lot with the first one, but that's another way to play pretend or be imaginative. And the book itself wasn't super profitable, but it was definitely great practice. And then the next video I made immediately after that, when you tackle one of these sometimes really big projects that are outside of your normal scope, sometimes when you get back to more of the normal things that you're working on, it seems a little easier to do a 2-minute video. And I did a Hot Wheels road trip which I think was like my 101st video on the channel. And that's still one of my favorites to this day. And there's a couple of tie-ins to the book of like, oh, it's this kind of network of track that's continually going through all these different backyards and suburban locations and these, the pool and stuff that was kind of in the book, but it was cool to do it on video in sort of just a more less story-based way and more just a thrilling roller coaster way.
Let's talk about the creative process there, because you've used that road trip kind of style a couple times, but it's not always the same every month. It's not always that you're not always going Hot Wheels. You bounce around a lot. Like, so when you finish the video, what's the creative process to get to the next video?
I do try and cycle objects or track types for sure, because like you're saying, I've got a couple of different track systems that I use for videos or toys. Like there's Hot Wheels, Legos, Connects, marble tracks, and even now wooden, like Thomas Wooden Railway and Brio tracks. But I do try and not make the same video back to back. A lot of these channels that I see take off, if they have something that's popular, then everything they do afterwards is like either trying to recreate that or just like build upon that exact same idea. And I think a lot of channels can really run themselves into the ground doing that, because audiences grow and change just like people do. And I don't think that a creator would be very satisfied to do the exact same thing over and over. And I don't think people want to watch the exact same thing over and over. But I mean, it's not like I'm trying to like reinvent the wheel every time I make a video, but I want to say, how is this different from something I've done previously? And it could even just be a little thing. And sometimes I'll think of an idea. I'm like, well, it's a little too similar to what I've done before. Like I had done one called Hot Wheels Stunts, where it was just some slow motion footage of Hot Wheels cars doing flips and tricks. I even got the GoPro point of view going off ramps and jumps and landing off a half pipe, which was actually just a slide in the backyard. But that video was successful. But I had an idea for a long time for Thomas the Tank Engine to do the same kind of thing. And I was thinking as I was making that video, I was like, oh, like this is like really similar to Hot Wheels Stunts. So I was going to call it Thomas Train Stunts. And I was like, well, are people really going to like this? Because it's a little too similar, and it doesn't even have the GoPro angles in it. And I thought that's what everyone had liked about the stunts videos. Everyone said, oh, the first person point of view is so cool. It feels like you're on the car. And I didn't have any of that in this other video. It was just all straightforward, no repeats from off to the side. But then that one really took off and was a big viral hit. So you never want to rule something out just because you feel like you've done it before. As long as there's some new twist or new perspective, I'll usually go for it.
And on the perspective note, where did the idea for disassembling a Hot Wheels and putting a GoPro session on, like how did you get that? We were talking about this, and we're like, is it a pen cam? And you have images on your website, so I highly suggest, if you're curious as a listener, go to his website. We'll put that in our bio. But yeah, how'd that idea come up?
Well, I mean, I do have to give credit to Mattel, the company that makes Hot Wheels, because they did have a Hot Wheels video racer, I think is what it was called, back in the mid 2000s, and it had a built-in camera that was the size of a normal car, but it had an electronic camera inside of it that could capture I don't know, maybe a couple minutes of footage, but it was very, very low resolution. And I was looking up pictures or videos of it, and I was like, well, that's really cool, because a lot of times when I build these tracks, even if it's just a marble track, people say, boy, I wish I could ride that as a roller coaster. And there was one I was building out in front of a house that the people would walk by and like, oh, it's such a cool track. And then they would watch me put it down and they're like, oh, like I want to put my hands up as if I was riding it. So people said that enough times that it was like, okay, like I got to figure out some way to work this in. And I tried a couple of different things. You were talking about a pen camera. The very first video on the channel, I used my brother's pen camera for the Connect roller coaster to get about half of it from a certain point of view layout. But of course, that is extremely low res as well. And I did some stop motion later with the roller coaster that I built. I just out of sand on the beach, just kind of paved the track with my hand, which was another hobby I had as a kid. And then I ran the camera along and took a picture every inch or so and kind of sped up or slowed down depending on. But that was very, very tedious as well. And so one thing from stop motion is I have so much patience from that and understanding of how long that takes that if like, okay, if I could film it in live action, that feels like a shortcut to me, even if it takes hours of like trying to adjust it or redo it or put it down. But the GoPro came out with the GoPro Session sometime in 2015, I think, and it was just a square 1.5-inch cube. And I thought, okay, like this is actually small enough. It's a little wider than the track is for Hot Wheels, but this could be possible. And I have this picture on my Facebook page from back then. I just stuck it on top of a car and it's looking very lopsided. And I just said like, what if, or something. And fortunately I had some friends, they have their own sort of set production company called Raptor House Effects. And it's Jesse Velez and Cameron Boyce. And I took the a whole box of cars over to them. I said, can you guys help me cut these up so I could fit a camera on them? And so we tried a bunch of different kind of hacks to get down to just the bare metal base and put the camera on. And we had one that I thought worked pretty well, but then when I actually went out to the beach to film with it with my buddy Zach Fu, we put that one down and the camera was not staying on because they had built a little wireframe cage, but the cage was loose and the camera was sliding around. So we ended up using another one that had the really big wheels in the back. But because of that, I had to put some plastic on the back tire and angle the camera up so it would ride over the wheels. But I think that actually helped the video a lot because instead of looking straight ahead, you're looking slightly down at the front wheels and at the track that's immediately in front of you, and it feels a lot faster than it would be otherwise. And I was really pleased with how that turned out. And that was just a straight line track. There's not a single turn in it. There's not any wiggles in the track, or I think there's one short jump at the end that looks a lot bigger on camera than it really was. It was just a few inches, but that video people responded really well to, and the point of view was kind of a surprise at the end of that. So I had the off ride and then the one take of it, the car going through from the side, but then when I cut to the viewpoint of the camera, people responded really well to that in the comments, and then were asking all about how I did it. And so I was like, okay, I got to use this more in the future. And then that Hot Wheels road trip video was the whole videos from that point of view was kind of the building onto that concept. And then the stunts video was doing not a continuous track, but just different individual stunts as crazy as possible. So it just kind of keeps progressing, I suppose.
And you've mentioned some of your most successful videos. You have a handful, I think over a dozen by our count, that are well over into the multiple millions of views. I'm going to go back a little bit and ask, at what point did you start realizing that being a YouTuber was going to be a possible full-time gig for you? When did you first start getting the response that you were like, okay, this is turning into something real?
I remember getting a magazine in the mail. I don't know if it was Time magazine or World magazine or whatever it was that my parents were reading, but they had just a little blurb in the back of it. This was around 2011 or so, and it said YouTube ads, advertisements. So now YouTubers and creators can get paid for their work, and it had a little picture of Shmo Yoho. Do you guys know that YouTube channel? It's the people that auto-tune the news and remix videos. But I'd always liked their videos, but it was like, oh, like they could do that as a job now. Like, that's cool. And I think my channel was a year old or so, but then I turned on the I read through all the paperwork about, turning on advertisements, because at that point you kind of had to go through a little bit of a process to get that set up. But I went back and I looked in the first, 2 weeks or so, it's like 1 or 2 cents per day, in terms of ad revenue. Mm-hmm. But then I kept adding videos, and it started to pick up. And by the end of high school and the beginning of college for me, it was like, okay, now it's lunch money. Like, I could buy, like I could buy food with this. And then it kept developing. I had a couple of videos that really took off, particularly Hot Wheels sandbox track, which I think is still now my most viewed video. And people are always confused why that's the most viewed one. They're like, really? Like, some of your other videos are cooler, and that one's just so kind of like simple and uh, kind of basic, but the kids and families seem to really like it, and the music's fun, I guess, and the editing is fast and hopefully well paced. But that really took off, and so then that became the #1 most viewed on the channel, and still is to this day. Although it might get surpassed soon, but yeah, I kind of stuck it out because my parents were saying, oh, hey, you should part-time work here or work there. Mm-hmm. And I remember taking my resume into a couple places, like I don't know why, but I went into Michael's craft store and I was just like, hi. Mm-hmm. Like it's never very good to say to someone like, hi, I'm here because my parents want me to be here. It's not really going to sell anyone. And I kept saying like, hey, like I'm really interested in this YouTube stuff, and I know it's not a lot right now, but if I keep adding to this, it could turn into something. And it did. And I, especially after I graduated college, I kind of went back home for a few weeks, but then I moved back out to California and said, okay, I'm really going to try and produce the best videos I can each month or more frequently, and see if I can continue turning that into a career, which was weird because I had a lot of friends from film school that would jump right into Hollywood or or some of them would go back home and you never hear from them again, unfortunately. But I was glad that I was able to have a film career sort of that allowed me Final Cut, essentially. And that's, in the film industry, that all these directors and producers, they're always talking about, well, I want to get Final Cut on my stuff, because essentially anytime you're working for a production company, even if it's your own project, someone else still has a final say or like a final decision on what gets seen or what doesn't. And it's really cool for YouTube that like I get to decide what I think is interesting or what I want to include, and I'm very happy with that and glad it could be my career.
And so, going back to the 10 videos that you have with over 10 million views. So, Drew said you have a few videos with over 1 million, but you have 10 videos with over 10 million views. What was it like when you watched? Well, I guess we kind of talked about this, but what was it like when you watched your first video on the channel go over 1 million views? You had already had 1 million views before you started your channel, but now you start your own, and it's yours, not your father's channel. What was it like to watch that go to over 1 million?
Well, it felt pretty special because when I'd first started the channel, my brothers and I would go to the Apple store and the Microsoft store at the mall, and we would put our videos on each computer and on each phone.
That is genius.
Just to play it. And so we were like, okay, we're getting more views, and then people are also going to come in and they're going to see these videos and remember them or whatever. But eventually the employees got smart and they were following us around and closing out the windows. So that strategy didn't work anymore. And then like we would also comment on other channels, say, hey, we really like your video, like check out ours too, which now is funny seeing, because I'll see other channels that are starting out that'll comment on my stuff and say, hey, check out my stuff, which is nice as long as it's related, I suppose. But yeah, I mean, that's the crazy thing about YouTube is these videos are always available for people to search or find, and so you have just a lot more room for exposure as opposed to trying to sell DVDs or Blu-rays or getting your film shown at festivals. It's just YouTube's kind of the biggest film festival there is in a way, and seeing that Sandbox video cross 1 million was, it took a little while. Like I think I had first posted it and then I waited a day. I was sort of superstitious at the time. I thought, okay, I don't look at the video myself, because if I just watch it myself, it's going to know it's just one person looking at this video. So I looked at the next day and it had 20 views. I was like, okay, well, that's 20 strangers out there that have watched this and enjoyed it. But then obviously that just kept multiplying, and I was, very glad to see it successful. But it's interesting sometimes when a video gets more popular, there will be people that, at least back then, that would comment and say, why is this so popular? Or why does this have so many views? There's a threshold where sometimes people are like, okay, this is underrated. Like, this needs to have more views. Like you guys were talking about the Ruggles video and the Vortex of Doom video. And then but there's like a breaking point where people are like, okay, like this is just toys in a backyard. Like, why does this have so many views? So I never know exactly what the perfect amount of views are for a video. But yeah, the Sandbox video, there were a couple critics of that. But then it has been cool to see other videos that have reached 1 million relatively fast if they've gone viral, or if people have shared them on Reddit, or if 2 or 3 of them have hit trending on YouTube. It's cool when there's a lot of positivity associated with that, and people are excited about the video as you are. So that's cool.
And so the comment section, you brought it up, right? So how do you react to the negative comments? What do you take it as?
Well, first I have to say I'm pretty fortunate that I'm not in the videos myself, and so I don't have to deal with a lot of these comments that other popular YouTubers do that are about their looks or their appearance or their style of talking or presenting. And so the comments on YouTube have never really bothered me a whole lot. And it's kind of like my dad used to say is there's no such thing as bad press, that even if someone goes out of their way to say this is bad and I don't like it, it's like, well, you spent the time to do that, so clearly you're invested in some way. And then even the more comments you get on a video, even if they're negative, sometimes that says to the algorithm, hey, this is causing more people to interact with it. So yeah, a lot of times if people get really upset over it, though, it's like, hey man, it's just toys and just videos. Or like there'll be comments like, oh, why did I watch this? Or like, who wasted their time making this? And it's kind of like, well, you're wasting more time, commenting about it. So
especially because the videos are only like 1.5 to 3 minutes long. It took you just as much time to scroll down, find the comments, type it in, post the comment.
Yeah, and I think YouTube's done a better job cleaning up their comment section. Originally, it used to be just a lot of spam and a lot of negativity, fake or lame or whatever. But a lot of the comments I see now are generally pretty positive. But I also have made it a point to not interact with negative comments. There was a point I had a Mario Kart stop motion video. I'll remember this pretty vividly because it was just after it was while I was in college. But then they said, hey, have you ever thought about redoing this video because the footage is very shaky and the graphics are not very good? And it was something that it was like well constructed enough of a criticism that I think was valid, but then it also really irked me at the time, because it was like, man, like this is still one of my favorite videos, and I know it's stop motion, I know it's jerky, and I know it's not the best lighting, but I was pretty happy with it. But I think there's a lot of those commenters that are kind of trying to nudge or like push the creator of the video to respond to it or to defend their work because they want the attention. And so it's tough to decide between valid criticism, which, sometimes when I'm posting a video, I'm thinking, boy, I really don't like this one part, but maybe no one will notice. And then I post and people are like, hey, a great video, but this one part or this one sound or this one cut here was weird, or threw me off or was confusing. And I'm like, oh, okay, like I think they're right, but sometimes there are comments that are just trying to aggravate or stir up trouble. And so I've learned to just like, just scroll past that. Like everyone should have their voice or right to say something. And I generally don't delete comments unless people are getting in a really heated debate with each other and cussing each other out. I don't like that. But I've learned over the years to not listen too much to those, but also not listen too much to people like, oh my gosh, this is so amazing and every video you make is amazing, and that are just overwhelmingly positive, because you can get really stuck in that mode too of listening to those and say, well, I want to keep making the same thing or do whatever made them happy, and I think it's just continually with each video trying to improve and make it better, but not going back and beating yourself up for things that could have been a little better.
That's a great perspective. And you
Absolutely.
really do interact. I mean, looking at you respond to an unbelievable amount of comments. It's pretty impressive, right? So I think that shows that you really care about your community. You really grow it. And that kind of goes into Saturday. So Saturday, your channel turns 10 years old, July 18th. And when we had our pre-call, you were like, I'm going to go live. I'm going to interact with my subscriber base all day, because that's what I want to do. That's how I'm going to give back to what they've given to me. So I think that's really, really neat. A great way to get into your community and to draw yourself in, right? You don't typically put yourself on the channel too often, but you do make it on. If it's a nose over the camera or whatever it is. But and so where after Saturday you turn 10, what does the next 10 years look like? What does the future for you look like as, a writer, as, a film? We didn't even get to talk about your collegiate career, right? You're collegiately trained in cinema. And is that a goal for you? Is that an ambition? Where are you going?
Well, it is crazy to think that it's been 10 years, because I look at other careers. Like there was Bill Watterson, who drew Calvin and Hobbes, and he drew it for 10 years every day, and then he stopped. He said, "I'm done. I finished, with my work." I think 10 or 15. Shoot, actually, I should go check that. But it's kind of crazy. It's like that is a long time to be in the same field, and I'm very glad with that. But I think something like YouTube allows for enough variety and enough, at least, control on my end to pace myself so I don't get burnt out, or to motivation to keep making stuff so I don't just forget about it. But yeah, I don't know what the next 10 years for the channel looks like. It's crazy looking back at even just the last 4 years since I've graduated college, because I think in college I learned a lot about silent films and making stuff that's visual, that even if someone had turned the sound off and there's no dialogue, they can still understand what's going on. And that was a big improvement to my channel, at least for the stop motion side of it and the storytelling side of it. And then learning a lot about just sort of the story progression, or the charts of what do they say, story structure, and how do I apply that to a roller coaster video even if there aren't any characters. It's like, well, I can still have an introduction, but then I can have a twist in the middle with some new tunnel or going underwater that's added, but then there's a resolution at the end where it makes it to the end and there's all the cars to finish, and it's a return to the normal world or whatever. Like there was just a lot of cool stuff I was exposed to in college that didn't seem like it was related, but I was able to work into not just the film stuff, but also I read a lot of books and classic literature and was able to draw from that. And so I'm hoping to keep doing that over the next couple of years, to keep reading stuff, to keep watching stuff and getting ideas. I've really had a fun time reading a lot of film director books, interviews directly with the director. So it's not someone else saying, hey, here's what I thought they were doing with their movies, or here's the symbolism I noticed. Like, here's the directors that are saying, yeah, here's what we put into it, or decisions we had to make to get this on the screen. And that's the kind of stuff I want to keep pouring into. And I don't know what that's going to look like on my channel. It was kind of a joke in film school, as people like, well, are you going to do features? As that was like the ultimate, crown of achievement, is making feature films. But I think I've seen a lot of my friends that have jumped into that and just get swamped. And then the project, it takes years to get finished and doesn't get seen. So I think with the channel, it's like just looking at things one piece at a time and just say, hey, what's the next small video I can make that's different or unique in its own little way? And who knows? I have a couple of ideas. I want to do more 360 videos, because that's a new technology where you can look all around you on your phone, not just straightforward.
That'd be cool.
Hopefully, yeah, I can work in that. I haven't done any Hot Wheels stunts with a 360 camera, but that would be a pain, but it'd be cool.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a way to figure that out, and I look forward to watching. How about some writing? You gonna another children's book?
Yeah, I do want to write a longer book, because I think people got to the end of the 60-page one and they're on their Kindle reading it, and I do get royalties every month from that. It's like $2 or $3 people read the Kindle. But it reminds me, it's like, hey, back when I started YouTube, making a couple cents a day, that's how it started. And so it's like, well, maybe if I go back and I keep pouring into this writing stuff or this self-publishing stuff, because Amazon makes it really easy that I don't have to have a big stack of these books in my bedroom that I ship out to people. It's just they take care of all of that. And it's not the most professional book, as if getting, like Scholastic to do it or HarperCollins or something. But for someone, for just a side gig, that would be pretty cool. Yeah, I have a couple of ideas for longer stories for sure, and I think writing a book is the way to go if you have a big story idea, but you don't have, the budget to make it a film or the programming skills to make it a video game or whatever. And a lot of people I know have written screenplays, but that just ends up sitting in a drawer
Hmm.
somewhere. And maybe a couple industry executives have read it, but being able to get your story out to people as fast as possible seems like the way to go. So I definitely want to write some more stories. I had comics I drew when I was a kid of these Fox characters that I really liked. I want to write their story. And then I had another crazy idea that was like kind of going journey to the center of the earth, like a mining crew that's trying to find something below the earth's lava crust or whatever. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
That, that
I'm
sounds
looking
really
forward to
exciting.
seeing some more content from you. Yeah, that sounds really exciting.
Yeah,
Thank you very
especially on the
much.
children's book side. I'll definitely read those to my son. I know my wife is always looking for great books to read to him because it's a great thing to grow their mind. But I appreciate the time today. It was really, really, really interesting talking to you. We have just on our notes, we hit maybe I don't know, 10-20% of what we wanted to talk
Yeah,
about.
if that, I think.
Shoot.
We could come back and do an entire one on just roller coasters, and maybe we will. But it was a pleasure to have you on today. We really appreciate your time.
Congratulations on the decade with your channel. That's really cool. We'll be watching on Saturday for your 10-year celebration. And
Yeah.
definitely thanks for
Awesome.
the time.
Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, I look forward to possibly talking to you guys more in the future. And if you've got any questions, just email them my way. Or if any listeners have questions, my email is robert at 5MadMovieMakers.com. If anyone's got any questions, I can hopefully help you out. But thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, no
Thank
problem.
you,
Let's
Robert.
just let's call it. We'll have we'll meet up in Ohio. Maybe we'll go ride some roller coasters.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go. I'm down. Yeah, absolutely. Once the coronavirus stuff has lifted up.
Yeah, once that's over. But thanks everyone for listening. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe with Robert's channel, 5MadMovieMakers, as well as it wouldn't be part of our research if we didn't plug that he should have an Instagram as quoted by his sister. So thanks so much for listening, and we'll catch you guys next week.